Okay, Vikings. Everyone loves Vikings, right? Well, depends on what kind of Vikings you're talking about, right? If you are talking about the Vikings that are going around raiding and pillaging and killing children and, just doing horrible, nasty stuff, I'm not sure we should love those people. I mean, if they were around today, we'd probably be like, holy shit, that's like ISIS or something. But for whatever reason, they're kind of like held in this romantic esteem. And I think the main problem with that is that we haven't differentiated between Vikings as the raiding, pillaging murderers and Nordic peoples of the same time period. So, for whatever reason, feminists have felt the need to latch on to Viking culture and try to insert feminism into it somehow. Why they should want to be associated with rapists, murderers, child killers, etc., I have no idea, but they do. And so now they're trying to insist that, in fact, 50% of Viking warriors were female. That is a bizarre claim, and let me just say a false claim. So this article on Red Ice Creations, Dispelling the Mythmakers, kind of an ironic name, but they posted this article, Better Identification of Viking Corpses Reveals Half of the Warriors Were Female. Interestingly enough, the study that they try to base this article on actually does not come to this conclusion. I mean, it's not surprising, right? Any person who's any even somewhat aware of history knows that that shit just didn't happen. Okay? So you go to the actual article and you see, okay, well, they uncovered some bones in eastern England from like around 800 AD, where Nordic peoples were coming over in boats and settling in England, in present-day England. And they found that, lo and behold, there was lots of female artifacts, dresses and jewelry and stuff. And that when they did gender identification studies on the bones, they were able to determine that some of the women that they had previously misidentified as men because they were buried with weapons were in fact female. However, the study does not then conclude that these women were warriors. Instead, what the study concludes is that these Nordic peoples coming over to England during that period were not as warlike as we often believe them to have been. That primarily their interests were that of a colonizer or a settler and not of an invader. But of course, facts are facts are not feminists' best friend, right? So they took this article and they said, aha, they were buried with weapons. That means all of them were frontline warriors and shield maidens are real, etc. Well, us people who are interested in history, we're not claiming that shield maidens were not real. But the best sort of explanation of shield maidens were that they were younger women who were, given basic training with weapons to be able to defend their homes, their children, and their villages when the men were away, either working in the fields or fighting or fishing. And raiders came, right? And this in itself is fairly historically significant. And I don't know why feminists feel the need to sort of try to inflate this into women being frontline soldiers or Vikings as rapists and child killers. Because, historically, women actually did not all that often stand up for themselves. Generally, if men were not around or men were defeated in battle, the women would submit to the invading army or occupier, and often be taken as wives or raped or whatever, right? And with very little or no resistance. So even the idea itself of a shield maiden, of a woman who may or may not have been married already, actually defending her household, is an important historical thing, which doesn't need to be blown out of proportion, but is significant in its own right. And furthermore is far more realistic than the idea of a woman charging into battle against men. Now, in a modern context, I'm sure that women can fight on a very even playing field with men because of the technology of guns that take the element of strength, raw physical power, out of the equation pretty much entirely. It becomes about physical fitness levels and precision and endurance and stuff. And men still do have an upper hand in those things. I'm sorry, but it's true. But it's not as significant as it was in the ancient world. So when you're putting on 20 pounds of mail and you're picking up a big spear and a shield and a helmet, all this stuff becomes very heavy. It's cumbersome. It requires a lot of endurance and strength. And then when you're facing up against an opponent that's just far bigger than you in general, far stronger, even if they're of equivalent size, his upper body strength is on average 40% stronger. Even if you both have the same fitness level, it's just not anywhere close to an even match in a life or death struggle, and put on top of that that the woman's weighed down with all this gear that she's going to struggle to even carry. So I'm not saying that a woman couldn't have potentially overtaken a man in a one-on-one fight in certain circumstances. Of course, that can happen, right? In individual cases. But in general, if you're pitting men against women, in that medieval combat scenario, then the men are just going to dominate through sheer force because the physical element was such an important factor in a medieval battle. So I have some experience with that, being sort of interested in HEMA, and I just really don't see how feminists can try to claim that women were frontline fighters or, half of Vikings. If they were half of Vikings, the Vikings would have gotten the shit kicked out of them by, pretty well anyone. Not to discourage women, but it's just facts, right? That's why we don't have the Olympics as one gender division. It's exactly because of this reason. And to say that a woman with a sword and armor and stuff is gonna run up and overtake a man with that is just, you just don't even know, right? Like you've been watching too much Lord of the Rings or something. It's not like that in real life. You have to overcome their physical resistance. The mail that they're wearing is basically going to render your sword almost useless. It's going to be like a club that you're going to have to beat him with. You have to use precision and endurance to try to wear him out and find a weak point in his armor or something. Get around his shield. It's just not that easy. You don't run up to someone and slice them and then go, aha, you see, I'm faster than you because I'm a woman. Well, that doesn't even ring true on the battlefield because it takes strength to wield a weapon. Just because a woman is smaller and sleeker doesn't make her faster. In fact, it makes her slower because it takes more of her energy to wield the same weapon that a man can wield far easier. So she's not going to be swinging as fast. She's not going to be swinging with as much force. Like, just look at these pictures, like, of the guys from the Viking show, right? And then you look at the woman from the Viking show. Now, is there a situation where you could imagine her being able to overcome one of these guys? Probably, but not when they're face to face, one on one, ready to go. It's just very, very unlikely. The scales are very much tipped in the man's favor, which is why women were not frontline fighters. So yeah, historically minded people, archaeologists, etc., have known for quite some time that women and children went with Nordic peoples when they went on their little settler colonization trips. And sometimes there was military conflict, of course there was, as they fought with locals and stuff. But the women did not play the lead fighting roles in these situations. They were looking after the household. That's just the way it was. And yeah, sure, shield maidens probably could have defended their children or themselves with a sword, maybe against some random raiders, but they were not Vikings, as you want to seem to insist that they are. And again, why would you want women to be associated with Vikings? Okay? I know the word Viking has become extremely popular, but Vikings were not nice people. Like, there's even a story, some guy was called, I forget his name now, but he was referred to as like the sissy, essentially, because he refused to kill children. This is the kind of people that you were dealing with. Don't associate women with Vikings. Like, why would you want to? It's not realistic. It's not historically accurate. You're making up shit now about articles that and studies that don't support your claims, and just to claim that women were rapist murderers, just don't.